G'day everyone and welcome to On the Outer. I'm Tom and I'm here today with my special guest co-host Lemons. Lemons, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Tom. I'm here. I'm filling in for the big man, for Gus. Some big shoes to fill, but I'm gonna start, by just questioning Richmond in crisis this week. Richmond in crisis. There we go. Job done. Gus will be happy.
Not this week. Fortunately, so that's a nice change. Look, Gus will be on hiatus for a couple of weeks while he deals with all the goings on up in the capital of our nation. A bit going on there at the moment. So Lemons is going to fill in for the next few weeks. Did anything catch your eye in the round of footy just gone, Lemons?
Well, look, I feel like the Bombers were bad again. We'll talk about that later on in the show. And aside from that, I didn't really pay much attention this week. So my hot takes are going to be pretty cold, to be completely honest with you.
All right, well, we're going to talk about Gold Coast Suns. They've had a few good wins. We're going to discuss Leon Cameron's departure from the Giants and their future this season and next. We'll talk about the Bombers. That was Gus's main talking point he wanted us to cover off on the show for him. We're going to do a bit of a new segment called The Pub Test, where I'm going to get Lemons' take on some of the hot button issues in the AFL from a more of a neutral observer's point of view to see if we can make sense of those. And I've got something to talk about, and I couldn't give a rat's Tossbag as well. So a bit of a jam-packed show before we finish off with reverse shine a light and a bit of success this week.
Yeah, maybe points all around by the sounds of things. If you like what you're hearing, please give us a like, rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcast, or right here on YouTube. Definitely give us a subscribe. Smash that button down here somewhere.
That's the one. There it is.
And if you want to get in contact, shoot an email to ontheouter1@gmail.com or, just on any of the old social media pages will do the trick.
All right, let's get into it. We'll start with the positive, and we'll talk about the Gold Coast Suns. We probably haven't talked about them much this year. We probably haven't talked about them in a positive light much at all since we started this show 7 or 8 years ago. But they're looking pretty good. They've now had 2 really good wins in a row. They've beaten Sydney at the SCG. They've beaten Fremantle at Metricon. That now means that they've beaten the 3rd, 4th and 5th place teams. The other one, of course, Carlton in 4th spot this year. That's good going, and they were actually quite competitive against Melbourne as well when they played them. I think they're in the situation now where they are very, very difficult to beat at home. Like Metricon, the Gold Coast, it's not necessarily an easy place to play if you're not used to it because it can be quite humid. It can be quite slippery. It can rain, as we saw on the weekend, but it's also very hot. So the variability of conditions there make it a bit challenging. And previously that hasn't been a factor because the Suns team's been pretty poor. But this year, they've almost made it into a little bit of a fortress, and they're quite hard to beat at home. And they're struggling in the past of stringing wins together. Continues at the moment. They haven't quite gotten a full roll of winning 3, 4, 5 in a row, but with their draw opening up, I think that they're a good chance to make it this year. And that would be their first time they've ever made the finals in, I think, 11 or 12. I think it's their 12th season now. Yeah,
that is pretty wild to think of. They've just been, cellar dwellers and a consistent easy beat the whole time they've been in the league. And this is something, obviously, as a bit of an outsider, it's still something I've been like, yep, Gold Coast, pretty crap. Even like when they had Gary Ablett competing for, Brownlow medals, it was, they were struggling to be competitive and make finals. But the team's looking a lot better. And even just, knocking off someone like Fremantle this week is, I guess you have to start taking them a bit more seriously with the ability to do that. And I guess home ground has a lot to do with it. But they're also getting like contributions from some really good players like Touk Miller and stuff. He's playing some incredible football. And, that forward line is pretty impressive as well. Casbolt kicked a couple of goals and what's the other guy? Maybe
Chol, kicked 4.
So
and look, those guys are good examples of players who, the Suns get criticised a lot because they pick up players who wouldn't get a game or couldn't get a game at their old clubs, and they come to the Gold Coast because they're a weaker team and they can have more opportunity to play, more opportunity to extend their career and get more money while they strike where the iron's hot from a financial point of view, that kind of thing. And there has been loads of players that have done that and they haven't made the grade up there. But the recruiting, I don't know what's changed, if the recruiting is a bit more shrewd or the environment's better and they're getting more out of players. But, Chol and Casbolt have had really good seasons. I think probably their best seasons they've had at AFL level this year. We've seen Sam Collins, who is their full back. I think he'd be well and truly in All-Australian contention, at least, for that full back position this year. And he was an off-cut from Freo who went to the VFL for a couple of years, dominated, and then got picked up again by the Suns, and it's just been a gun. He's now their vice-captain. Their ability to get the best out of players on their second chance, I think, is really what's different about this team compared to the other teams in the past where they've just recycled guys just for the sake of it. I think they're good. And like I said, their draw's opening up. They're now playing the one team in the top 6 currently as it stands again for the rest of the season, which is Brisbane, and that'll be in Queensland. And they play the bottom 6 right now all again. They play West Coast twice more and they play North Melbourne twice more. We're in a situation now where the teams that play North twice and or West Coast twice are very, very much advantaged. Geelong's another one of those. But Gold Coast, all they need to do is pick off the games against the teams below them on the ladder. They don't need to do anything else. And they are very, very likely to finish 8th, potentially higher. If it's a competitive year, they might not make it on percentage, but I think they're a really good shot. If the wheels don't completely fall off, they could make finals this year.
Yeah. Do you think, how high could they actually finish, though? Realistically, if they finish 8th, are they just going to be an easy game for the first person, for whoever finishes 5th? Or do you think there's actually a chance for this Gold Coast team to make any noise once the playoffs sort of comes around? once the finals come around?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that they'll struggle. If they don't get a home final, then I think they will struggle because of that. I think they are potentially a 5-goal better team at home than they are away. We'll see how it plays out. We're obviously looking forward quite a bit with regard to that. But if they snuck into 5th or 6th, you can't really see it happening. But if they got a home final, then absolutely. If they finish 7th or 8th and have to play one of those teams, in Melbourne or head to Perth or Sydney, wherever it may be, I think they probably would be, certainly on talent, they would be a fair bit below the rest of the sides. And I think that you might see them exposed because of how good their draw was, in a final. But look, it would be so good for Gold Coast to make the finals. Sometimes people say, what's the point of making the 8, sneaking into the 8 and getting smashed? And that's been one of the arguments about Essendon in the last few years is every couple of years they will make the finals and they get beaten, and then it's what did we learn there? But for the Suns, that would be so good for that club to make finals for the first time. It needs to happen in the next couple of years, so why not this year?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I guess we should move on and talk about the other expansion club and the news that's been going on there, and that is, of course, the Greater Western Sydney Giants and Leon Cameron and his departure and sort of what it means for GWS and his sort of legacy as a coach with the Giants. How have you sort of interpreted this last couple of weeks and with the news with Leon Cameron making his way out?
Look, it's early. I was trying to think of the other the earliest departures from a senior coach, and the only other one I could think of was Malcolm Blight in St Kilda, I think in 2000. Where basically he lasted 5 or 6 weeks, and it was never a happy marriage there. So this is pretty early on, but it seems to be handled very, very well. You've just the amount of people that have used the word dignified and classy, and the whole thing's been very, very friendly. I think it's pretty clear that Leon wasn't going to coach there next year, and I don't know if he actually particularly wanted to. So then the discussion comes, why not just pull the trigger now? Why have a farewell, not even month. It's would be more than half the year, and that's just pointless. So I do see that. It is a bit of a wasted year anyway, though, because how much can they change now? The new coach, your old mate, Spike McVeigh, he's going to have an opportunity now and a really good audition, but they can't change much. The game plan, all the training they did over pre-season, he'll be able to tweak things. He'll be able to put players into other positions, or it's always very interesting to see if any players get dropped when a new coach takes over, or any players from the twos come straight in, because you get an idea of who they like and who they want the team. But not much is going to change in terms of the actual game plan style. As for Leon himself, I think there was always question marks over him tactically, and that's always going to happen when you have such a talented team, because the list was so good and was perceived as being the most talented list in the AFL for a lot of his time there. Anytime they don't win the premiership, the questions immediately go to, well, what are they doing wrong tactically to not make the most of this talent? Why wouldn't they be winning the premiership with this team? And I think that's valid. There are certainly times in his tenure where you have questioned the tactical side of what he's doing. And this year in particular, they played very, very safe footy when they've got all of this skill and all of this talent and all of this flair, and they weren't really utilising it. But, maybe that's not his strength. I think I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago as well. I don't think that the role of the senior coach is necessarily to be the main tactician anymore. I think it's to be the manager. And I think he's a good manager. I think that despite what a lot of people saw in that Amazon documentary, which didn't paint him in a great light, the players generally really liked him. And I think he probably would have been quite a popular figure there, but maybe he just didn't have that master tactician by his side to be able to make the most of the list. Ultimately, if you think about this, Lemons, he played finals with that since the first year that the Giants made finals, which was under his tutelage. They played and won a final every year except for one. So they're not just scraping in. They're playing a final and they're winning a final every year except for one since the first year they made it. I think that's five from 6 years. So, he's one of the most successful coaches of this era. He's probably only behind Hardwick for successful, finals performances in this era.
Do you think, though, that not being able to get over the edge is sort of what's cost him? Because this year's obviously been a disappointment for GWS for a lot of reasons, but his inability, I say his inability, I'm already sort of painting him with the brush. Do you think it's his lack of, something lacking with his coaching that's the reason why they couldn't get over the hump? Like you say, the talent is there, everything's been there, and they've had chances and they've had healthy teams going into finals, but they've never been able to win the big dance, and is this something that you think that he lost the team and lost the faith of the players, and therefore that's sort of why he's been moved along?
That's not my impression. I think, look, he's been there 10 years. 10 years is a long time. And 10 years when you don't win a premiership is a long time. And the only reason he's lasted that long is because he's made a grand final, made 2 preliminary finals as well in that time. So I don't think that they were ever the best team in it either. They never finished first on the ladder. There wasn't any year in which they were premiership favourites going into the final series. So no, they're about where they're at, and maybe they should have won one with that talent. I think they probably could have certainly won more than one with the talent. That's not in dispute, but they're hard to win. It's difficult to win premierships, and he gave them the best opportunity to get there. And I think there'll always be question marks over whether he made the most out of the list, and I think that's absolutely fair enough. But ultimately, he is a really significant figure in the history of that club now. He's turned them into a real football team through, what he's been able to achieve with the finals appearances. And they're they're a highly respected club across the board. It's not just their performances on the field. They're a strong club from the ground up. So, yeah, no, I think it's a good legacy, and interesting to see where they go now. Jimmy Bartel is their football director, and he was speaking on the radio, made some interesting comments about, because they have the soft cap with football department spending, do they need to spend $1 million a season on Clarko, or would they be better off spending half of that on a coach and then getting a really, really good high performance manager, because they're always injured. That team always is completely wiped out with injuries to the best players every year, and they can only have a certain amount of money to spend. Do they need to spend all the money on the coach, or do they get a rookie coach and then get the other stuff really, really humming first?
Yeah, I guess that is a very interesting question. Only one other point I wanted to ask. Do you think Leon Cameron is done with coaching now? Do you think this is his career over, or do you think he has interest in moving on somewhere else? Like, is he someone who another club would sort of look at coming in as in a senior role?
I think that he could. I think he'd be more. I would be surprised if another club went after him as a senior coach, just because of that has had this long. He's had 10 years. That obviously his experience counts for plenty, and he will have gotten him better over that time. But I think Leon Cameron would be more suited to more of a senior assistant role, because he is very. It does come across very stately and very. I think he's very good at that managerial role, as I mentioned. So, right now there's Mark Williams is doing that at Melbourne with really good success. Got Simon Gould, the head coach. Mark Williams, very, very experienced Port Adelaide Premiership coach, worked at lots of different clubs. Someone like that, I can see Leon Cameron being that kind of senior figure to help along a young and experienced coach. So I think that would be more his go from here on in.
Awesome. Maybe we can get him along to the Bombers, because there's been a few issues there this season, and there seems to be a lack of leadership at the top. Now, this is coming from Gus. He obviously wants us to have a chat about the boys, the Dons, but I got to be honest, I don't know if I have that many positive things to say about Essendon and what's been going on. This game against Sydney, there's been a lot of talk about the side not being tough enough and not being willing to stand up and sort of fight and have a bit of pride in losing. Do you think that rings true, or is this just a bunch of old footy talking heads, trying to be tough guys on TV? Like, I'm talking about Lloyd's comments specifically. Yeah.
So for anyone that missed that one, Lloyd basically was very unhappy with the Bombers' lack of response to Luke Parker's. I suppose he was attempting to humiliate Dylan Shield on the field, saying that he ducked. He said, if you actually look back at the footage, he didn't really. It was just a normal sort of contested situation in which Shield came off second best. There wasn't a whole lot of cowardice to it, I didn't think. But, Lloyd basically thought that, that the Bombers should have run through Parker at the next centre bounce, or something that Lloyd himself was partial to on occasion back in the day. There is merit to what he's saying, in that I think that had that happened at another team, maybe like a Brisbane or a Melbourne or one of these really, really strong teams, you may have seen a different response. I'm not saying they would have run through Parker, but they may have been fired up in a sense, and we didn't see that from Essendon. We also don't really know who from the Essendon team saw it. Dyson Heppel was on TV on the couch on Monday night. He said that he didn't see it and hadn't seen it up until that moment. A little bit sceptical about that with today's media training and all that kind of thing. And it's as everyone saw that. Everyone saw the footage on Sunday and Monday.
I saw it. If Dyson Heppel didn't see it, I don't know how that's even possible.
Yeah. So, that was an interesting one. Look, there is this theory about Essendon that they are a nice club and they have this culture of placating people, supporters, board members, players, AFL. And it comes from the idea that when they went through this trauma of the supplements scandal, which was coming up to 10 years since it was first sort of came to light, or maybe a bit less, the idea that they caused all of this heartache to players, to the AFL, to the game in general, to their supporters in particular, really. And then from that point onward, they were like, we have to placate, we have to appease everyone. They gave players contracts that they should never have given them because they felt like they owed them. They gave players more money than they should have. They did everything right to try and reclaim their face within the community of the AFL. And we know now the ongoing effects of trauma so much more than what we used to. And we see how these things just play out over years and years. I'm talking about in society in general, right? And so football clubs are like these organisms, and they have these learned behaviours and learned histories. And I think that we're just still seeing the effects of. I think it's a really good theory. I've heard it said a bit over the last few years, but it just makes so much sense with the way that they're playing now. That there's something at the club that is just on tenterhooks all the time because of the shame and guilt about what happened, back then. Do you feel that as a supporter? Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, I guess I don't know how far it seeps into every aspect of the game, but particularly like in this instance, like Sydney are a better team and Sydney were winning. What do I want Essendon to come out and fight them for? It's like, it's kind of, I don't want them to give up. And obviously you want your team to show some pride and all of that. But I'd rather they showed some pride by like playing good footy as opposed to like coming out and trying to be pretend tough guys. To your point about like the actual long-term ramifications of like the doping scandal. I mean, yeah, it does sort of ring true, and it does kind of feel like this is something that's going to hang over the club forever to a certain extent. But only a decade removed from like the biggest cheating scandal in sports, basically. Like this was an international sort of issue. It makes sense to me that there's going to be long-term effects, and the club won't be able to compete in the same way with other teams for a significant amount of time. The way around that, the way past that, the way through that, I don't know what that is, and I don't think anybody really knows what that is. It's just going to be a matter of time, hopefully, and getting the right people in place.
Yeah. Yeah, and you do hear a lot of Essendon people talk about, I don't really know what it's always this idea that like, there's people at the club that are controlling things, or there's, the wrong people in the wrong positions, or there's all this pressure from coder groups, but I never quite, and I believe it, but I want someone to come out and explain it, like someone who's in the know to actually come out and say, this is what's going on at Essendon, this is why the cultural issues are. They're always kind of alluded to without actually being explained properly, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe the pressure is, not to talk about these things. But we're hearing a lot of kind of side mouth kind of conversations rather than actually finding out what the issues are. And last year, everything was looking good. They'd cleaned out these guys, Danaher, Sard, guys that didn't want to be there were gone. It was all happy days. So I don't know. The other thing as well, you talk about on-field stuff like 30 tackles. They laid 30 tackles on the weekend for the entire game. And I think I saw the stat that there was around about 62 attempts at tackles. So that's what, 15 a quarter, something like that. There's 15 times a quarter where a player is even trying to tackle someone. That's like historic lows. And the 30 that they'd landed, that's the lowest at the SCG, which is a ground notoriously easy to tackle on because it's so small, since 2003, when tackling numbers in general were like half of what they are now. So it's historically poor performance from a defensive and effort markings.
Do you think that's an indication that like Ben Rutten is like his coach, like kind of like what I was saying about Leon Cameron, has he lost the faith of the club? Are they not playing? Like, because surely that's not the strategy going in. Surely the strategy is not, let's let them run around and do whatever they want for the whole game. Yeah, like it's an effort thing there. It's not something that can be fixed through like strategic changes. It's just like they have to try harder. I mean, am I oversimplifying it too much? Is Ben Rutten not able to get them to try? Is that a reason we should be thinking about moving on from him? I don't know.
Like, I find it hard to say that he should go because he's so new still, and he was in the finals last year. But that is the thing that Essendon supporters seem to say a lot, is that it is effort. Like, that's the most frustrating part. Is like, maybe their team isn't as good on paper as what they showed last year with making the finals, but it's still not a bottom 2 or 3 side, which is where they are now. So then it does seem like there's issues around effort, and I don't know what the issue. I don't know how you could possibly solve that. It seems like it's a mental thing. And that last quarter against Hawthorn looked, for all intents and purposes, like a circuit break. I tipped Essendon to beat Sydney because I thought they've turned it around. They're going to be okay now, and they put in probably the worst performance of the year from an effort point of view. So I don't know what the answer is.
What, Tom? What do you mean you don't know the answer? We need the answers.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Just a couple more teams from the weekend. I thought we'll just quickly talk about them because they had good wins. The Saints beat Geelong. Look, that was a great game. I think both teams, Geelong will be gutted to lose, but it was a good game. They were in front for a fair bit of it. Saints with a huge burst of 20 minutes in the third quarter, which just swung the game. Paddy Ryder, he didn't have a possession in the entire third quarter, and yet everyone at three-quarter time was being like, Ryder's just won them the game. Like, his palm work is just absolutely incredible. And now they lose Jack Steele, their captain and best player, for, I think, well, they're saying 8 to 12 weeks. So you put it, a couple of months at least. It's a savage blow. It really is. But I think that where they are now, they're a much more resilient group than probably they were last year or even the year before, even though they had a good year there. They seem like they'll be able to keep winning. It is going to be a big, big effort for them in the midfield, though.
Is this kind of... I'm not really sure how it works with footy as much, but sometimes, like, when a player gets injured and they get a bit of time off to get their body right, it can, like, work to your advantage. Like, if they come back in before finals start, do you think that's a chance to happen with Jack Steele? Or is it sort of like this is the kind of injury that slows you down and it actually takes you a full year to recover before you're back to full strength?
Well, he's having surgery, shoulder surgery, so there will be a long recovery time. It's not like he's going to be off his feet. Like, he'll have the surgery and then there'll be recovery from that as opposed to recovery from the fracture. So I think that's a good chance he'll come back and have a really big role to play in the finals. And I do think Saints will get there. But it's just that the thing about St Kilda is that they don't have lots of A-graders, and he's their best player by a considerable margin. I think that they're going to have a lot of, like, Crouch is having a really good year. Seb Ross is having a really good year. Gresham, like, the guys that are, the one position they do have depth in is that position of inside mid. They just don't have a star like Jack Steele at this stage. But I think that maybe by the end of this next couple of months, one will emerge. Like, maybe Jade Gresham will emerge as the star that they've always hoped that he will. He's already having a really good year. Maybe he'll become the number one mid and just go on a big tear and be the best player that they need. So definitely possible.
Yeah, I guess that's good. I guess an injury happening now. Obviously, all injuries seem like bad timing, but happening now as opposed to if he was going to miss finals, obviously that would be completely devastating for the club.
And just quickly on the Baggers, they've now, so after 9 rounds, a game clear in the top 4. Which is a great effort. I think that the thing that's different with Carlton this year is they're pretty, like, strong. They're pretty tough and physically tough. And I'm really looking forward to this game against Sydney on the weekend because Sydney, despite their reputation, aren't always physically tough around the footy. Sometimes they can get pushed off the ball a bit. And so I think this will be a really good test for both teams. Harry Mackay, look, it didn't really hurt them that much on the weekend. Curnow got a couple of goals late. I think he was beaten by Sam Taylor for the Giants. They were important goals, but overall Taylor beat him. And Mackay not being there didn't hurt them as much because they got good contributions from Silvani and Durden and some of their other smalls and the midfield. It's not going to be the case every week. Giants are not very good defensively, so you can really open them up through the middle of the ground and hit targets. They are going to have games where not having Mackay there will really hurt them. And they do still have a very good forward, Curnow, which is awesome for them. But remains to be seen. I think this game against Sydney will be a big, big test. But at the moment, I don't think you can. Like, I think Carlton are right now deserve to be where they are in the top 4. Like, they've played really good footy. Their good players are standing up, and their role players are a lot better than they were last year, and are doing a really good job. So, yeah, looking forward to this game against Sydney on Friday night. It's an absolute ripper.
All right, Tom, let's move along to a new segment that you've got cooked up here, and that is the pub test.
I love to have a beer with lemons. I love to have a beer with lemons. We drink in moderation, and we never, ever, ever get rolling drunk. We drink in the town and country, where the atmosphere is great. I love to have a beer with lemons, 'cause lemons is me, mate. Yeah.
All Alrighty, Lemons, new segment today, the pub test. Now, there's all sorts of pub tests going on in the country at the moment for various different things and various different individuals, but we thought we'd conduct our own here at On the Outer. So I kind of just wanted to run a few concepts or issues by you, because so often people in football discussions become very insular, and they get their views shaped by what the zeitgeist is, what certain people in the media say, what their friends and family and what their club thinks. And so we can lose sight of, the raw issue at hand, or whatever the significance of what we're talking about actually is. So I thought I'd run a few issues by you and see if we can get your view as a relatively uninformed football agnostic. And, we'll conduct the pub test on these. So first one.
All right, let's do it.
A little bit of talk. Well, it's been going on all year, but increased in the last week that James Hird could be making a return to coaching, potentially at GWS, where he's already a part-time development coach, or even some talk that he could return to the Bombers as senior coach as soon as next season. What do you think about that? Do you think Hirdy should be given the opportunity to coach again? Do you see any issues with it? And how does it make you feel as a Bombers fan?
Oh, that is a very tough one, because James Hird was my childhood idol as a Bombers fan growing up in the 90s. I loved Hirdy, and then with everything that happened and everything that sort of happened since in the aftermath of the doping scandal, I find it really hard. I would find it really hard if he came back to coach the Bombers. I don't think it's something I would want. I think everyone deserves a second chance and all that, and I don't think whilst he was the head coach, he was the only one culpable of everything that happened with the Bombers then. But I'd really find it hard to look past it. Maybe at another club it would be different. Maybe if he had somewhere like you say, at GWS or something like that, it would be a bit different. But him coming back to the Bombers, I think I probably wouldn't enjoy it. It goes to what we've just been talking about, and the Essendon trying to escape the shadow of this cheating saga that they haven't been able to do. Well, bringing back James Hird is not going to be a solution to that problem. So I wish him well, and I hope that Hirdy's had a really rough time of lately. Everything that I read about him in the news the last few years has been it's been tricky, but I don't think I'd want him at Essendon. So no.
Yeah, it would be a very hard sell, wouldn't it? To Bombers people. And with regard to him being at another club, I guess, it's not going to happen again, is it? You wouldn't say, oh, we're not going to appoint Hirdy because of what happened last time, because, that he's the last person that is going to get involved in any kind of questionable injections. But he just hasn't coached for so long, and he was a good coach when he was head coach, but it wasn't like we've lost a coaching great when he had to step aside or whatever it was. So yeah, I think there's other better candidates out there, really, especially because he's only doing a couple of days a week at the moment. So yeah. All right, another one on the Bombers, Gus. This
old habits die hard, my friend.
Another one on the Bombers, Lemons. I'm not sure if you saw the footage of the team smiling on the weekend. There was some smiling happening after the game. This has happened a few times this year. There was even some stuff before the game where it was Dyson Epple's 200th match, and he had all his family and whatever on the field, and he was smiling and hugging before he ran through the banner. Do you, as a supporter, have any issue with players who've just suffered a bad loss or are in a dire situation in terms of their on-field performance, smiling or enjoying themselves publicly in front of the fans?
I didn't see the footage that you're referring to, but you want the players to care as much or more than you care, as a supporter of any club in any sport, I guess. And so I can understand why people would be upset after they've just been absolutely, punked on the field, and then they don't look like it matters to them at all. I can understand people being upset by that. Personally, though, I think if you're a professional football player, you live in your dream, you're probably pretty happy. So getting a few smiles in, probably, not the worst thing. And you want your players to be happy, and that hopefully leads to them playing better. So I guess I don't have an issue with it specifically, but I'd rather they were smiling after a victory, if that, if that makes sense.
Good answer. Good answer. Last one, and this has been this has probably been the biggest kind of off-field discussion this year is the Tasmania bid. Now, August apparently is when the decision will be handed down, but I'm wondering if you have a take on the Tasmanian licence for the 19th team and if you think they should come in.
Well, just based on the success of the additional Tasmanian team in the NBL this season, which has been an absolute Cinderella story. I mean, they went to the finals. They lost to Sydney in the finals, but just first year in the league, and they absolutely exceeded expectations. The island all got behind them, and like clearly, the whole of Australia really got behind them. They were this like team that everybody loved. And the numbers in terms of supporter base, obviously AFL and NBL, very different numbers you need to keep people coming through the gates, and the amount of tickets you need to sell to be successful. Obviously, there's a bit of a difference there. But people in Tasmania are starved for clubs to go for. Like they're forced to support Hawthorn and North Melbourne when they come down once a year for a visit. This is not something you wish upon anyone. Like you need a club, and I think it's about time. How hard is the travel anymore? You know what I mean? Like flying somewhere obviously makes a difference, but it's not, the 90s where they're in cheap commercial planes. They'll be absolutely looked after, and it's easy. It's only an hour to Hobart anyway, right? Not even from Melbourne.
Yeah.
I think the AFL is wasting the opportunity to cash in on its popularity by not spreading to Tasmania. Like why they keep trying to push to the rugby states, like Queensland and Sydney and New South Wales, you're never going to topple rugby as their sport that they prefer. Whereas in Tasmania, it's like it's up for grabs. They love the AFL. There's so many people down there that would be keen to watch it and keen to support it. I think the sooner the better with a Hobart team or even just a Tasmanian team in general.
Well, that's pretty comprehensive. I think the argument against it is kind of what you said, is that people in Tasmania are already watching footy and people in Queensland and New South Wales are not. So they're trying to capture a new market and have new teams which will be supported by new fans, whereas in Tasmania, people already have a team and they already watch the game. So you're kind of it would be an existing fan. It would be pleasing an existing fan base, and it would be trying to pull them away from the teams that they support. That's the only issue I have with it.
Pleasing your existing fan base should be one of the jobs that the AFL is trying to do, right?
You'd be surprised. There's a bit of actually a bit of talk that the Jack Jumpers would be keen to share like branding, like the football team would be the Jack Jumpers, and that they would share colours and that kind of thing. And I don't know if that's likely to happen, but apparently it's been put forward by the NBL team. That's it.
Awesome. Did I pass the pub test?
How'd you enjoy that? Well, it's more about whether the issues passed the pub test. I think some of them did, some of them didn't. Not so keen on Hurdy. A bit neutral and smiling, and 2 thumbs up for Tassie.
Sounds good. All right, Tom, let's move on to another segment. We're going to do I Couldn't Give a Rat's Tossbag.
I couldn't give a rat's tossbag. I couldn't give a rat's tossbag. I couldn't give a rat's tossbag.
All right, so a bit of a story in the papers last week, Lemons. I thought this one perhaps a little bit of a non-story. Jason Horne-Francis, the number 1 pick from last year's draft at North Melbourne, has decided to put his contract extension talks on hold. And I saw this come up on my feed, and I just thought I could not give a rat's tossbag whether Jason Horne-Francis has put his contract talks on hold. This isn't a story. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the history of putting your contract talks on hold, but my memory is that this really kicked off in about 2010 or 11 when Travis Cloke, who was at the peak of his powers at the time, probably the best centre-half forward in the comp at the time, and he was continually will he, won't hit the sign with Collingwood. There was this thing about all year. It got to pretty late in the season. I think even the end of the season, he still hadn't signed. And the comments was that he'd put his contract talks on hold until the last minute. And that was quite a significant thing at the time because it meant that usually the player would leave. He ended up staying. But since then, we've had this like constant discussion about players putting their contract talks on hold as if it's an indication that they are gone. Because historically, you know, they were. But this is players who were out of contract for a start. Horne-Francis is not. Much older and so ready to maybe to go into free agency or having had a solid career at a club already. Horne-Francis has been there for 2 minutes. And players who maybe had maxed out on their cash generation and wanting to, you know, get the full payday that they can receive. Now, Horne-Francis is in a position now where he is presumably going to have exponential growth in his performance. He's a highly rated number 1 pick. He's only played 7 or 8 games. Like, why on earth wouldn't he put his contract on hold until the end of the season when presumably his value is going to be a lot higher and he's likely to get a lot more money? It just makes perfect sense. And he's not even out of contract. He's not out of contract for another 18 months. He doesn't need to do shit. So if I was him, I wouldn't be signing. Why would he? Why would he sign yet? He's going to get a lot better before he gets out of contract. And North Melbourne is going to have to wait. Like, this is his absolute right. If his management should be absolutely advising him, put your contract talks on hold until the end of the year at least. Like, what? Why is this even being reported as a concerning thing for North?
Yeah, generally if someone comes out and says they're putting their contract talks on hold, is it not because they're being asked by the media, how are your contracts going? Like, why haven't you signed? Is there interest from the media with a rookie who's played 8 games being like, why haven't you extended your contract yet? Like, why does he need to come out and say that he's doing this? Can't he just not say anything and we can assume that this rookie is not signing a contract anytime soon? Well,
he didn't say it. I think it was reported, so it must have come out, you know, someone from the club has leaked it or some journo has got the information. I understand there's a lot of interest in him because he's the number 1 pick, but the fact that North are so bad and like everything's going so badly for him that it's quite juicy to think that the number 1 draft pick could leave. But he's not going to be leaving this year. There's a whole other year next year which he's contracted for, and that's that. Like, there's zero chance he leaves at the end of this year. So I just don't even know why it was like treated as kind of a saucy news grab, because it just seems to me the most logical thing in the world that his contract talks would be on hold. And maybe he had some discussions and then was like, oh no, I'm actually just going to wait till the end of the year. That's fine too. Like, that's absolutely fine. That's what they should do. These things should be ongoing as a checking in point. So anyway, couldn't give a rat's toss bag about that, as you can tell.
No, that makes a lot of sense that you don't give a rat's toss bag about that. One question I do have. Do you give a rat's toss bag about this split at Richmond with Dimmer wanting to kick Dusty out and doesn't want Dusty at the club anymore, saying, you know, good riddance, basically, if he wants to leave, get him going. How do you feel about this turmoil at Richmond with these allegations coming out with Dimmer?
Yeah, interesting. I think as reported in the news last week, the Dimmer's been pulling cones and stuff, so I can understand why he'd be having some funny ideas. But no, look, I genuinely, like, obviously I would love Dusty to be running around in a Richmond jumper forever, like until I die. Like, that's just, you know, and it just feels so good seeing him back on the field the last few weeks. Even if he's not doing anything or doing anything good, just to like look out in the field and see him run past, it's like, yes, like, yes, it just feels so good. But he doesn't owe Richmond anything. Like, I would be totally fine if he left and played his last couple of years in Sydney, and I would get it, absolutely. It's funny because, like, it used to be this thing where if players don't finish their career as a one club player, it was like a negative. Whereas the champions of the last few years, particularly those Hawthorn guys like Hodge, you know, Mitchell, Lewis, it almost becomes a rite of passage to get to the end of your tenure at the club that you were really successful in, and then go and spend a year or two at a developing club helping them win another premiership or get into contention from a lowly position. So it's almost like your career isn't complete if you don't do that now. So if Dusty went and spent the last 2 years in Sydney, it was good for him, good for the Swans. It means he gets to keep playing for a bit longer. Like, yeah, I can't ask anything more of Dustin Martin as a Richmond fan. Like he's given me so much. So
Yeah,
he can do what he likes.
That's a very good point. I guess for me, like obviously I don't know him and I don't have as much love for him as you do. I doubt many people do, to be honest, based on the way you talk about him. He's a kind of lead by example guy, whereas these other club legends that you mentioned, like what Mitchell went up north because he had like a coaching plan, a succession plan, right, and all these sorts of things. I don't really see Dusty going to Sydney and then ending up as an assistant coach. Like, is it more like he wants to sort of fade away into the night without having too much attention? And in that case, like, could he not just retire? Like, or is it just a question of earning a bit more money while he can?
No, I don't think he wants to retire. I think he wants to keep playing footy, and he's still clearly good enough. I just think that. Well, like he's got these links with Sydney because he grew up there. He grew up in Castlemaine and then he moved to Sydney and then he was picked up to come back to Richmond at 18 or whatever. But he spent a lot of his later teen years in Sydney with his dad. So he's got connections there. He's got family there. And, you know, he's not someone who enjoys the spotlight. So the same reason that Buddy moved up there, the same reason that Plugger moved up there, the same reason Barry Hall moved up there. Like these superstar players are drawn to Sydney because they don't have the fishbowl footy centric kind of, and he's a recognisable figure, and I'm sure that Buddy gets recognised in Sydney, but it'd be nothing compared to what it would be like around Melbourne. So I think that's the appeal, really, those two things. Yeah.
All right, so what you're saying is opposing fans of Richmond should all approach Dusty as often as they can in public just to try and chase him away, send him away from the club.
Yeah, I mean, he's still going to be in the league, so you'll have to deal with it when you come up against Sydney. But, yeah, I guess if you particular access to grind. Yeah, no, that's a good question, though. And we'll see what happens at the end of the year. I wouldn't be at all. I mean, God. I still, like, my heart says, like, I still think he'll stay at Richmond. I just think he loves the club so much. But it wouldn't be a tremendous surprise if at the end of the year he requested to go up there for his last couple of years. I think that would be very much on the cards and very much fair enough.
Cool.
All right, Lemons, let's finish this bad boy off with reverse shine a light. So you're going to, I guess, do the honours for Gus. You picked one last week as well. Why don't we start with you? Who did you have?
So I had Sean Lemons. He is my pick in perpetuity from this point on. And like, I don't know how the points work. Like I've expressed this on the pod in the past. Yeah. I don't really understand how you get a point. Sean Lemons was pretty good. He had one. He probably had his best game of the year. He's been getting successively better, like week after week. But what did he end up with in terms of possessions? Yeah, 17 disposals, 14 kicks, 10 marks. Like, how good do you have to be before you get a point? Is that a point? Is that
look, it's pretty good. Let's have a look at his. So he's had 17 touches, which is that's the most he's had this year. He hasn't had more than 14 in any other game. He's had 10 rebound 50s. That's a lot. I would be very surprised if he's ever had more than that in his life. In fact, I can check that. Sean Lemons has never had more than 7, and he's had 10 in this game.
Feels like a point to me, Tom.
And none of the Freo small forwards really got off. I don't actually know who he was playing on, but none of them got off the chain. I think you get a point, Lemons.
Yeah, first week, this game's easy.
Beginner's luck, no doubt. Well done. All right. And who are you going to go with for next week?
I'm going to lock in Sean Lemons again. I feel like
Excellent.
He's going to progressively improve and he's just going to carry me through the championship. Why mess with the system that's working? So, yeah, let's go Sean Lemons.
All right, horny Shawnee Lemons again for you. And Gus, he had...
Jackson Haitley last week.
Jackson Haitley, yes, that's right. Very keen to point out how well Haitley played, and I think he was spot on there. He looks like he's had probably the best game for his career, 27 touches and a goal. Now, Haitley, like former first-round draft pick, went to GWS, came to Adelaide, basically hasn't got a game since he's got there, and it's been really disappointing. So obviously he's come in now, and they're backing him in to play a really good role in the midfield. And he's had a really, really good game. So Gus gets a big tick for that one there.
Yes, and who did you pick, Tom? Who did you have this week?
Well, I actually had Sam Powell-Pepper, who I think has also had his best game for the season. He was really good against North. Just plays a really hard role in the forward line. Like I said last week, the fans love him. And I think this was probably his most prominent game for the year, and he was actually named quite high up in the best, I think, maybe even second or third. So looks like we're 3 from 3 this week, Lemons. This is incredible. You must be our good luck charm or something.
What an absolute ripper. Let's hope we can keep this winning streak alive. I think it's the competition's better when we're all doing well, I think. I think that's
true.
That's the case.
Yes. It's good for shine a light. All right, so you got Gus's pick for this week?
I do. He has phoned it in. He's got Lachlan Bramble from the Hawthorn Footy Club. Quite a young player. Just made his debut last year, I believe. He's played 13 games in total. Look, I've got to be honest, I don't know much about Lachlan Bramble. This will surprise the listeners greatly that I don't know the young players on the Hawthorn Football Club's list. But what do you have to say about him? What's his sort of vibe?
Well, he came onto the scene pretty late last year. I think he might have even been a mid-season. He was either a mid-season draft pick or as a mature pick in the year before, and he started playing towards the end of this season and picked it up. Like, he was immediately a very good player. And he's been out injured for most of the season, so he's just coming back into the side and slotted in beautifully. So yeah, I think it's a good selection by Gus. He's a pretty solid contributor, Bramble.
All right, how about yourself, Tom? Who have you got for us and the listeners this week?
I'm going with
a green sheet. A green sheet.
what?
That's quite a pick for you there, Tom.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going with old Green Sheets Answorth from Brisbane. Noel Answorth. Obviously, that didn't work this time. He is actually, coincidentally, but he's basically playing a similar role for Brisbane in the game against Hawthorn as Bramble. Both kind of wingers / halfbacks. So I guess they're going to go head to head. Well, in a sense, and we'll see if either of them can snaffle their way to a point in that big battle between the Hawks and the Lions on Sunday.
Is this the first time the two of you have had reverse shiner lights going head to head in the same game? That's pretty exciting.
We have done it before on purpose, like we've picked a defender against a forward or something like that. But no, this just sort of panned out this way, I think.
Ooh, how exciting. Well, best of luck to everyone, especially my man Sean Lemons. To repeat, get 2 points 2 weeks in a row. That'd be a first, surely.
Yep, that would be... it's happened before. All right, Lemons, that's it for the show this week. Thank you so much for jumping on board. Hope you didn't get too confronted with some of those pub test questions there. I tried to keep them relatively smooth for you. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again next week for another episode of On the Outer. Thank you for having me. Very much enjoyed it. Obviously, the listeners, if they have any questions they'd like to send in for the pub test, send them to ontheouterone@gmail.com. I am happy to accept even tougher questions. Go harder. They can be pub tests. They can be pretty tough, I reckon. And otherwise send them into any of the other social media pages. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. And as we said at the start of the show, give us a subscribe on the YouTube. That's a really good thing you can do to help us, and flick the show around, do whatever you need to do to get it out there, and keep tuning in, because we really, really love having you on board. And that's it, Lemons. We'll see you next time. Ciao.